Society tells us serial killers are men, cold, calculated predators who hunt in the shadows. But that's not the whole truth. Women kill too. And when they do, their methods are often more patient, more intimate, more brutal in ways that don't always leave visible scars. They poison slowly. They smother quietly. They exploit trust in ways male killers rarely do. Some experts argue that female serial killers go undetected longer precisely because we refuse to believe a woman, a mother, a nurse, a caregiver, could be capable of such evil. These aren't isolated cases. These are documented, verified convictions of women who murdered multiple victims over months and years. Think about that. Before we dive into these disturbing cases, if you want to follow true crime stories that challenge what you think you know about serial killers, subscribe to Final Breath and hit that notification bell. We cover cases with respect for victims and commitment to factual accuracy. Drop a comment. Do you think female serial killers are more dangerous because society underestimates them? Let's begin. Aileen Wuornos, America's first widely publicized female serial killer who didn't fit the typical pattern. Most female serial killers poison family members or patients in their care. Aileen killed strangers. She killed like male serial killers do, with guns, along highways, targeting victims of opportunity. Between late 1989 and 1990, 7 middle-aged men were found shot to death across central Florida. All had been robbed, their cars stolen, and the killer was a woman working as a prostitute on Florida's highways. Her name would become infamous. Her story would inspire movies, books, documentaries, even an opera. But before the fame, before the execution, Aileen Wuornos was a deeply troubled woman whose life spiraled into unimaginable violence. Aileen Carol Pittman was born on February 29, 1956 in Rochester, Michigan. Her childhood was marked by abandonment and abuse. Her father, Leo Pittman, was a convicted child molester who committed suicide in prison. Her mother abandoned Aileen and her brother Keith when they were young. They were raised by their maternal grandparents. Aileen later claimed her grandfather sexually abused her and that her grandmother was an alcoholic. By age 15, Aileen was pregnant. She gave birth to a boy who was immediately put up for adoption. Her grandfather threw her out. She became homeless, living in wooded areas, surviving through petty theft and prostitution. By her late teens, Aileen had moved to Florida. Her criminal record grew: armed robbery, forgery, assault, drunk driving, auto theft, check fraud. She was arrested repeatedly throughout the 1970s and 80s. In 1986, she met Tyria Moore at a bar in Daytona Beach. They began an intense romantic relationship. For the next few years, they lived together, with Aileen supporting them both through prostitution and theft. On November 30th, 1989, Aileen shot and killed her first known victim. 51-year-old Richard Mallory picked her up along Interstate 75 for sex. His body was discovered several miles from his abandoned car. He had been shot multiple times in the chest. Over the next year, Aileen killed 6 more men. David Spears, 43, a construction worker, was found shot 6 times in the torso in June 1990. Charles Carskadden, 40, was discovered days later, shot 9 times. Peter Seams disappeared in June. His car was found abandoned, but his body was never recovered. Troy Burris was found in August with 2 gunshot wounds. Charles Humphreys was discovered in September with gunshot wounds to his head and torso. Walter Antonio was found in November, shot 4 times in the back and head. All the victims were middle-aged white men. All had picked up Aileen for prostitution services. All were robbed after being killed. Police began connecting the murders. Items belonging to the victims were traced to pawn shops. A thumbprint on a pawn receipt belonged to Aileen Wuornos. In January 1991, Aileen was arrested on an outstanding warrant at a biker bar in Port Orange, Florida. Police contacted Tyria Moore, who had moved to Pennsylvania. They convinced her to call Aileen from jail. During recorded phone conversations, Aileen eventually confessed. She told police she killed the men in self-defense, claiming each victim had raped her or attempted to rape her. The trial began in January 1992. Prosecutors argued she killed for robbery, not self-defense. The jury was not allowed to hear evidence that Mallory had a history as a convicted sex offender. On January 27, 1992, Aileen was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. Over the following months, she pleaded no contest or guilty to 5 additional murders, receiving 5 more death sentences. In total, 6 death sentences for 6 murders. In her final years, Aileen's mental state deteriorated. She retracted her self-defense claims, saying she killed those men and robbed them as cold as ice. On October 9, 2002, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection at age 46. Her reported last words were cryptic, mentioning sailing with the Rock and returning like Independence Day. Aileen Wuornos remains one of the most studied female serial killers in history. 7 men are dead, and Aileen spent her final years on death row. A cautionary tale of abuse, violence, and the unraveling of a human soul. The next case takes us to Sacramento, California, where a sweet-looking grandmother ran a boarding house for the elderly and disabled. She seemed kind, generous, always willing to help. But beneath her gentle exterior was a calculating killer who poisoned her tenants, buried them in her yard, and cashed their Social Security checks for years. Dorothea Puente, the death house landlady, born Dorothea Gray, on January 9, 1929 in Redlands, California. She grew up in a troubled home with alcoholic parents. By the 1970s, Dorothea had found her calling. She ran a boarding house in Sacramento for elderly, disabled, and mentally ill individuals. She presented herself as a community resource. She wore vintage clothing, large glasses, and didn't dye her graying hair. She looked like everybody's grandmother, trustworthy, harmless. She was anything but. In 1978, Dorothea was arrested for forging tenants' signatures on their benefit checks. She was placed on 5 years probation with a strict condition. She could not run a boarding house or handle other people's government checks. She violated probation almost immediately. In April 1982, Dorothea's friend Ruth Monroe died in an apartment Dorothea owned. Monroe had overdosed on codeine and Tylenol. Police ruled the death a suicide. Weeks later, 74-year-old Malcolm McKenzie accused Dorothea of drugging him and stealing his pension. Dorothea was convicted of theft and administering drugs. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison. While serving her sentence, Dorothea began a pen pal relationship with 77-year-old Everson Gilmouth, a retiree from Oregon. When she was released in September 1985 after serving only 3 years, Gilmouth picked her up from prison believing they would marry. Instead, Dorothea moved him into her boarding house at 1426 F Street in Sacramento. In November 1985, Dorothea hired a handyman to build a large wooden box, 6 feet by 3 feet by 2 feet. She told him it was for storage. She paid him $800 and gave him a red 1980 Ford pickup truck as a bonus. The truck had belonged to Everson Gilmouth. Dorothea and the handyman drove to a riverbank and dumped the box. On January 1, 1986, a fisherman discovered the box. Inside was the badly decomposed body of an elderly man. It would take 3 years to identify him as Everson Gilmouth. In the meantime, Dorothea collected his pension and forged letters to his family. Throughout the mid to late 1980s, Dorothea continued operating her boarding house illegally. Elderly and disabled tenants moved in. Many were homeless alcoholics or suffered from mental illness. Investigators later called them shadow people, individuals living at the margins of society whose disappearances might not be noticed. Dorothea read their mail, intercepted their Social Security checks, and paid them small monthly stipends while keeping the rest. 78-year-old Betty Mae Palmer arrived at Dorothea's boarding house in October 1986. Weeks later, Dorothea obtained a California ID card with her own photo, but Palmer's name. She began cashing Palmer's Social Security checks. By November 1988, several tenants had vanished. Then 51-year-old Alvaro Montoya, a developmentally disabled man with schizophrenia, failed to show up for meetings with his social worker. His social worker reported him missing. On November 11, 1988, police arrived at 1426 F Street. They noticed recently disturbed soil in the yard. Officers began digging. They found one body, then another, then more. 7 bodies in total were unearthed from Dorothea's yard. During the initial search, police did not consider Dorothea a suspect. They allowed her to leave. She fled to Los Angeles and visited a bar. She struck up a conversation with an elderly man who recognized her from news reports. He called police. Dorothea was arrested and extradited back to Sacramento. Dorothea Puente was charged with 9 counts of murder. Her trial began in 1992 in Monterey. Prosecutors argued Dorothea poisoned her victims with drugs, then cashed their Social Security checks after they died. Toxicology reports showed the presence of sedatives in the remains. The defense argued that the tenants died of natural causes. The jury deliberated for weeks. They were deadlocked on 6 of the charges. Dorothea's grandmotherly appearance worked in her favor. Ultimately, the jury convicted her of 3 murders: Dorothy Miller, Benjamin Fink, and Leona Carpenter. She was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Dorothea Puente died in prison on March 27, 2011, at age 82 from natural causes. Until the day she died, Dorothea maintained her innocence, but investigators believe she murdered at least 9 people, possibly more. The Victorian house at 1426 F Street still stands today, a grim reminder of the death house landlady. Now we turn to one of the most disturbing cases of medical murder in American history: Genene Jones, the pediatric nurse suspected of killing dozens of infants and children in Texas during the 1980s. Unlike killers who murder for money or revenge, Genene killed to create medical emergencies. She thrived on the chaos. She wanted to be the hero who saved dying children, even if she was the one who poisoned them first. Born Genene Ann Jones on July 13, 1950, she became a licensed vocational nurse and began working in pediatric intensive care units in San Antonio, Texas. In 1981 and 1982, something terrifying was happening at Bexar County Hospital. Babies were dying at an alarming rate. Healthy infants would suddenly go into cardiac arrest. Children recovering from routine procedures would mysteriously stop breathing. The deaths almost always happened during the evening shift, the shift Genene Jones worked. A study by the Centers for Disease Control later found that during a 15-month epidemic period, children on Genene Jones's shift were 25 times more likely to suffer cardiac arrest and 10 times more likely to die. Medical staff began to notice. They jokingly nicknamed her the Angel of Death, but hospital administrators were more concerned about lawsuits than about stopping her. In March 1982, instead of firing Genene Jones, the hospital quietly let her resign with a good recommendation. She immediately found work at a pediatric clinic in Kerrville, Texas, run by Dr. Kathleen Holland. Within weeks, children with routine medical problems were mysteriously stopping breathing in Dr. Holland's clinic. In September 1982, 15-month-old Chelsea McClellan was brought to the clinic for a routine checkup. Genene Jones administered an injection. Chelsea immediately gasped for air. Genene gave her a second injection. Chelsea went limp and stopped breathing. In the chaos of rushing Chelsea to the hospital, Genene somehow slipped into the ambulance and gave the little girl a third injection. Chelsea's heart stopped. She died. Genene had injected her with succinylcholine, a paralytic drug that causes muscle relaxation and respiratory failure. Investigators discovered that Genene had been injecting children with dangerous substances including succinylcholine, heparin, and digoxin to induce medical crises. She would then step in as the hero trying to save them. Many died despite her efforts or perhaps because of them. In 1984, Genene Jones was convicted of murdering Chelsea McClellan and injuring 4-week-old Rolando Santos. She was sentenced to 99 years for murder and 60 years for injury to a child. But because of an old Texas law designed to relieve prison overcrowding, Genene was scheduled for mandatory release in March 2018 after serving only about 30 years. Victims' families were horrified. Prosecutors reopened the case. In May 2017, Genene was indicted for 5 additional murders from her time at Bexar County Hospital. The victims were infants: Joshua Sawyer, 11 months old; Rosemary Vega, 3 months old; Paul Villarreal, also 3 months; Richard Nelson, 8 months; and Rolando Santos again, whose case was reopened. In January 2020, just weeks before her trial was set to begin, Genene Jones accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to the murder of Joshua Sawyer in exchange for the other charges being dismissed. She was sentenced to life in prison. During the sentencing hearing, mothers of the murdered babies confronted Genene. Connie Weeks, Joshua's mother, told her directly, "I hope for you to live a long and miserable life behind bars." Rosemary Vega Cantu said, "I waited 38 years of my life to tell you I will never forgive you." Melissa Luna, whose 3-month-old brother Paul Villarreal died, called Genene a cold-blooded monster. Prosecutors believe Genene Jones is responsible for the deaths of between 11 and 60 infants. The exact number may never be known because many hospital records were destroyed. Genene Jones remains in prison today, serving a life sentence. She will never be released. Her case exposed catastrophic failures in hospital oversight and the dangers of medical professionals who kill. Kristen Gilbert, another nurse who killed patients to create emergencies, but her motive was different. She wanted to impress her boyfriend. Kristen Heather Strickland was born on November 13, 1967 in Fall River, Massachusetts. She grew up in an affluent suburb and excelled in school. In 1988, she married Glenn Gilbert and became a registered nurse. She landed a job at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Northampton, Massachusetts. She was well liked by colleagues, organized holiday gift exchanges, and seemed like a model employee. But starting in the early 1990s, the death rate at the VA hospital began to spike. Patients were dying of sudden cardiac arrest, many without any prior heart problems. The deaths almost always occurred on Ward C during the evening shift, the shift Kristen Gilbert worked. By 1995, Kristen was having an affair with James Perot, a hospital security guard. Co-workers noticed unprofessional behavior between them during medical emergencies. They were seen playing footsie and touching during operations. Kristen told Perot her husband physically abused her, a claim Glenn Gilbert denies. In November 1995, Glenn Gilbert believes his wife tried to poison him by putting drugs in his food and later injecting him with a clear liquid that caused him to lose consciousness. Around the same time, nurses at the VA hospital noticed a disturbing pattern. The hospital was running out of epinephrine, a synthetic adrenaline that can save lives during a heart attack, but is fatal if misused. 3 nurses reported their concerns in February 1996. Kristen Gilbert immediately quit her job and checked herself into a psychiatric ward. From the psychiatric unit, she called James Perot and confessed, "I did it. You wanted to know? I killed those guys by injection," she told him. Perot went to the authorities. To divert attention from the investigation, Gilbert called in a bomb threat to the hospital. She was arrested. Investigators determined that during the 7 years Kristen Gilbert worked at the VA hospital, she had been on duty for almost half of the 350 deaths that occurred in Ward C, a statistical impossibility. She had been injecting patients with massive overdoses of epinephrine, causing their hearts to race out of control until they suffered fatal cardiac arrest. Her confirmed victims were Henry Hudon, 35 years old, Kenneth Cutting, 41, Edward Squira, 69, Stanley Jagodowski, 66. All were veterans. All were vulnerable patients in hospital beds. Prosecutors believed she killed them to create medical emergencies that would require James Perot to respond, giving her opportunities to see him and impress him with her nursing skills. In some cases, prosecutors said she killed patients simply to leave her shift early for dinner dates with Perot. Kristen Gilbert went on trial in November 2000. In March 2001, she was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, and 2 counts of attempted murder. Though Massachusetts had abolished capital punishment in 1984, prosecutors sought the death penalty because the crimes occurred on federal property. The jury deliberated for days on whether to sentence her to death. On March 26, 2001, the jury recommended life in prison instead. The next day, the judge formally sentenced Gilbert to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, plus 20 years. She narrowly escaped becoming the only woman on federal death row. Kristen Gilbert is currently incarcerated at FMC Carswell in Fort Worth, Texas. Prosecutors suspect she may have been responsible for up to 60 deaths at the VA hospital. Her case is a chilling reminder that serial killers don't always operate in dark alleys. Sometimes they wear scrubs and work in places we trust with our lives. Juana Barraza, known as La Mata Viejitas, the old lady killer. Between 1998 and 2006, elderly women in Mexico City were being murdered in their homes. The killer posed as a social worker or government employee offering assistance. Once inside, the killer would strangle the victims and rob them. Police initially believed the killer was a man or perhaps a transvestite because of witness descriptions. They were wrong. The killer was Juana Barraza, a 48-year-old woman who worked as a professional wrestler under the name La Dama del Silencio, the Lady of Silence. Juana had a traumatic childhood. Her mother was an alcoholic who allegedly traded Juana to a man for beer when she was a child. That man repeatedly raped her. Juana had 4 children from those assaults. As an adult, Juana became a professional wrestler, performing in the lucha libre circuit. But she harbored deep rage toward elderly women, possibly linked to resentment toward her mother. Police estimate Juana Barraza murdered at least 11 elderly women, though she may have killed many more. Her victims were women in their 70s, 80s, and 90s living alone in Mexico City. Juana would knock on their doors dressed professionally, claiming to be a social worker from a government program. Once the elderly women let her inside, Juana would strangle them with her bare hands, with stockings, or with telephone cables. She would then rob them of small items. On January 25, 2006, police were called to the home of an elderly woman who had been attacked. A neighbor described seeing a heavy-set woman with short hair leaving the building. Police began searching the area. They spotted Juana Barraza carrying a stethoscope and other items. They arrested her. Inside her home, police found items belonging to her victims, including identification cards, religious articles, and other personal effects. Juana Barraza was convicted of killing 11 women and sentenced to 759 years in prison, the maximum sentence under Mexican law. During her trial, prosecutors presented evidence linking her to at least 40 murders, though she was only convicted of 11. Psychological evaluations described her as having serious personality disorders and deep-seated rage toward maternal figures. Juana showed little remorse for her crimes. She is currently serving her sentence in a Mexican prison. Her case shocked Mexico and exposed how vulnerable elderly women living alone can be to predators. It also challenged assumptions about who commits serial murder. For years, police looked for a male suspect while Juana continued killing. Marybeth Tinning, a mother who murdered her own children. Between 1972 and 1985, 9 of Marybeth Tinning's children died under suspicious circumstances in Schenectady, New York. For years, their deaths were attributed to medical conditions or sudden infant death syndrome. The truth was far more horrifying. Marybeth was smothering her children. Marybeth Rowe was born in 1942 in Duanesburg, New York. She married Joe Tinning in 1965. They had their first child, Barbara, in 1967. On January 20th, 1972, 8-day-old Jennifer Tinning died. Doctors said she died from hemorrhagic meningitis and attributed it to natural causes. Just 17 days later, on February 5th, 1972, 2-year-old Joseph Tinning died. His death was attributed to Reyes syndrome. The next month, in March 1972, 4-year-old Barbara died of what was diagnosed as another case of Reyes syndrome. 3 children dead in 2 months. Medical professionals were concerned but had no proof of foul play. Over the next 13 years, Marybeth had 6 more children. 5 of them died. Timothy was born in November 1973 and died in December 1974 at 13 months old from what doctors said was sudden infant death syndrome. Nathan was born in March 1975 and died in September 1975 at 5 months old. Doctors again attributed it to sudden infant death syndrome. Mary Frances was born in October 1978 and died in February 1979 at 4 months old. Another SIDS diagnosis. Jonathan was born in November 1979 and adopted by the Tinnings after Marybeth suffered a miscarriage. He died in March 1980 at 3 months old. SIDS again. Michael was born in August 1981 and died in March 1982 at 2 years old from another suspected case of sudden death. Tammy Lynn was born in August 1985. On December 20th, 1985, Marybeth brought Tammy Lynn to the hospital, claiming the child had stopped breathing. Doctors were able to revive her, but she was in a coma. Tammy Lynn died 3 days later. This time, medical professionals were deeply suspicious. 9 children in one family dead over 13 years was statistically impossible. Police began investigating. Marybeth Tinning confessed to smothering 3 of her children, Timothy, Nathan, and Tammy Lynn. She said she smothered them when they were crying or when she felt overwhelmed. She claimed she didn't know why she did it. In July 1987, Marybeth Tinning was convicted of second-degree murder in the death of Tammy Lynn. She was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Though she confessed to killing 3 children, she was only tried for Tammy Lynn's death because of evidentiary issues with the older cases. Prosecutors and investigators believe Marybeth killed all 9 children who died, but proving the earlier deaths were murders after so many years was nearly impossible. Marybeth Tinning has been denied parole multiple times. In August 2024, she was granted parole after serving more than 30 years in prison. She was released at age 82. Her case is one of the most disturbing examples of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a psychiatric disorder where a caregiver fabricates or induces illness in someone under their care to gain attention and sympathy. Marybeth Tinning received sympathy and attention as the grieving mother each time a child died, which may have reinforced the behavior. The loss of 9 children devastated her family and community. To this day, questions remain about whether she could have been stopped sooner. Velma Barfield, the first woman executed in the United States since 1962. Velma Bullard was born in October 1932 in rural North Carolina. She married Thomas Burke in 1949. They had 2 children. In 1969, Thomas died in a house fire. Investigators suspected arson, but Velma was never charged. She later married Jennings Barfield, but he died in 1971 from what doctors said was heart failure. After his death, Velma began a relationship with Stuart Taylor. She also worked as a caregiver for elderly individuals. In 1974, Stuart Taylor became violently ill with flu-like symptoms. He died on February 3, 1974. An autopsy revealed he had been poisoned with arsenic. Police investigated. They discovered Velma had also cared for 2 elderly individuals who died under suspicious circumstances. Dolly Edwards died in January 1977. John Lee died in March 1977. Both had been in Velma's care. Exhumation and testing revealed both had been poisoned with arsenic. Further investigation led police to exhume Velma's mother, Lily Bullard, who had died in December 1974. She too had been poisoned with arsenic. Velma Barfield confessed. She admitted to poisoning Stuart Taylor, her mother Lily Bullard, Dolly Edwards, and John Lee. She claimed she poisoned them to cover up the fact that she had been forging checks and stealing money from them to support a prescription drug addiction. She said she never intended to kill them, only to make them sick so they wouldn't notice the missing money. Prosecutors didn't believe her. Velma Barfield was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Stuart Taylor in November 1978. She was sentenced to death, despite appeals and pleas for clemency, including from religious leaders who noted her conversion to Christianity in prison. Velma Barfield was executed by lethal injection on November 2, 1984, at age 52. She was the first woman executed in the United States since Elizabeth Ann Duncan was executed in California in 1962. Velma Barfield's case demonstrated that female serial killers are often caregivers who poison their victims, a pattern that would be seen repeatedly in cases like Dorothea Puente and Genene Jones. She is buried in a church cemetery in North Carolina. Beverly Allitt, the angel of death who terrorized a children's ward in England. Between February and April 1991, Beverly Allitt, a pediatric nurse at Grantham and Kesteven Hospital in Lincolnshire, England, attacked 13 children in her care. 4 of them died. Beverly Gale Allitt was born in October 1968 in Grantham. She suffered from Munchausen syndrome, repeatedly faking illnesses and injuries throughout her life. She trained as a nurse and in 1991 began working on the children's ward at Grantham Hospital. Within weeks, children on the ward began suffering unexplained cardiac arrests and respiratory failures. On February 21, 1991, 7-week-old Liam Taylor suffered a heart attack while under Beverly's care. He was revived, but suffered another attack and died. On March 5th, 11-year-old Timothy Hardwick, who was recovering from an epileptic seizure, suffered a heart attack and died. Doctors were baffled. The boy had been stable. More children fell ill. 1-year-old Kaylee Desmond suffered multiple unexplained attacks. 5-month-old Paul Crampton had repeated breathing emergencies. 2-month-old Becky Phillips suffered cardiac arrest and died. 15-month-old Claire Peck died after suffering a heart attack. The common factor in all these cases was Beverly Allitt. She had been the nurse on duty for every single incident. Hospital administrators launched an investigation. Police were called. Toxicology tests on the children revealed some had been injected with insulin. Others had been injected with potassium chloride. Some had been suffocated. Beverly Allitt was arrested in May 1991. She was charged with 4 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempted murder, and 6 counts of causing grievous bodily harm. During her trial in 1993, prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence that Beverly had deliberately harmed the children. She injected them with insulin to cause hypoglycemic episodes. She injected potassium chloride to cause cardiac arrest. She suffocated some by smothering them or tampering with their oxygen supplies. Why? Experts testified that Beverly suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy. She harmed children to create medical emergencies so she could be seen as the hero trying to save them. She thrived on the attention and drama. On May 28, 1993, Beverly Allitt was convicted on all charges. She was sentenced to 13 concurrent life sentences with a minimum term of 30 years. In 1994, her minimum sentence was increased to 40 years after an appeal by prosecutors. Beverly Allitt remains in Rampton Secure Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility in Nottinghamshire, England. She has been described as one of Britain's most dangerous female criminals. Her youngest victim, Becky Phillips, was just 2 months old. Miyuki Ishikawa, Japan's most prolific female serial killer, a midwife who murdered infants. Between 1944 and 1948, Miyuki Ishikawa, the director of a maternity hospital in Tokyo, was responsible for the deaths of at least 103 infants, possibly many more. Miyuki was born in 1897. She became a midwife and eventually ran the Kotobuki Maternity Hospital in Tokyo. After World War II, Japan faced severe economic hardship. Many families could not afford to care for newborns. Miyuki saw an opportunity. She began neglecting infants whose parents couldn't pay hospital fees. She deliberately withheld food, water, and medical care, allowing the babies to die. She then approached the grieving parents and offered to arrange funerals for a fee. She made money from both ends of the tragedy. Some sources suggest Miyuki rationalized her actions by claiming she was helping families who couldn't afford children. Others believe she was simply motivated by greed. Authorities discovered the scheme in 1948 after a doctor noticed an unusual number of infant death certificates signed by Miyuki's hospital. Police investigated and found evidence of systematic neglect leading to infant deaths. Miyuki Ishikawa was arrested along with several accomplices, including her husband and a doctor who helped falsify death certificates. In 1952, Miyuki was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in prison. Her sentence was later reduced to 4 years. Her husband received a 4-year sentence, and the doctor received 2 years. The light sentences sparked outrage. Public prosecutors appealed, but the sentences were upheld. Miyuki Ishikawa was released after serving her reduced sentence. The exact number of her victims is unknown. Official records document 103 infant deaths, but investigators believe the true number could be as high as 169. Miyuki died in the 1970s. Her case remains one of the most disturbing examples of medical murder in Japanese history and highlights how female serial killers often kill the most vulnerable victims, those who cannot fight back or call for help. Judy Buenoano, the Black Widow of Florida. Judias Welty was born in April 1943 in Quanah, Texas. She had a difficult childhood marked by abuse. She married James Goodyear, an Air Force sergeant, in 1962. They had 3 children together, including a son, Michael, who was born with disabilities. In 1971, James Goodyear became violently ill. He was diagnosed with what doctors believed was heart failure. He died in September 1971. Judias collected life insurance money. In 1977, Judias married Bobby Joe Morris. They moved to Colorado. In January 1978, Bobby Joe Morris became ill with flu-like symptoms. He died. An autopsy attributed his death to natural causes. Judias collected more life insurance money. She changed her name to Judy Buenoano, a Spanish translation of Goodyear. In 1980, Judy's son Michael, who was 19 years old and used a wheelchair due to his disabilities, went on a canoe trip with his mother. The canoe capsized. Michael drowned. His mother and her boyfriend survived. Judy collected $60,000 in life insurance. In 1983, Judy began dating John Gentry. Within months, John became ill with mysterious symptoms. He suffered from nausea, vomiting, and numbness in his extremities. Doctors couldn't determine the cause. In June 1983, John Gentry's car exploded when he started the ignition. He survived with serious injuries. Police investigated. They found evidence of a bomb in the car. They traced the purchase of bomb components to Judy Buenoano. Further investigation revealed a pattern. Police exhumed the bodies of James Goodyear and Michael Buenoano. Toxicology tests revealed both had been poisoned with arsenic. Bobby Joe Morris's body was also exhumed. He too had been poisoned. Judy Buenoano was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder and attempted murder. Tests on vitamins John Gentry had been taking showed they contained arsenic and formaldehyde. Judy had been slowly poisoning him. At her trial, prosecutors presented evidence that Judy had murdered her husband James Goodyear by poisoning him with arsenic, drowned her disabled son Michael to collect insurance money, and poisoned her boyfriend Bobby Joe Morris. She also attempted to murder John Gentry with poison and a car bomb. In 1985, Judy was convicted of the attempted murder of John Gentry. The following year, she was convicted of James Goodyear's murder and sentenced to death. She also received a life sentence for Michael's murder and 12 years for the attempted murder of Gentry. Although she was never convicted in Bobby Joe Morris's death, evidence against her was strong. On March 30th, 1998, Judy Buenoano was executed in Florida's electric chair at age 54. She was the first woman executed in Florida since 1848. No other women have been executed by electric chair in Florida since. Judy Buenoano showed no remorse for her crimes. She maintained her innocence to the end. Investigators believe she killed for financial gain, collecting life insurance policies on her victims. She represents a classic black widow killer, a woman who murders spouses and family members for profit. These 10 cases represent different facets of female serial killers. From Aileen Wuornos, who killed like a male predator, to Dorothea Puente, who poisoned elderly tenants for their Social Security checks, to Genene Jones and Kristen Gilbert, who murdered patients to create medical emergencies, to Juana Barraza, who strangled elderly women in their homes, to Marybeth Tinning, who smothered her own children, to Velma Barfield, who poisoned caregiving victims, to Beverly Allitt, who attacked children in a hospital ward, to Miyuki Ishikawa, who neglected infants to death, to Judy Buenoano, who poisoned family members for insurance money. These women killed dozens, possibly hundreds of people combined. They exploited positions of trust. They targeted the most vulnerable: children, the elderly, the disabled, patients in their care. They used methods that were hard to detect: poison, suffocation, induced medical crises. And they went undetected for years because society refused to believe a woman, especially a mother or a nurse, could be a cold-blooded killer. Female serial killers are estimated to comprise about 15% of all serial killers. They kill differently than men. They use poison more often. They kill people they know. Their methods are less violent on the surface but no less deadly. And because society underestimates them, they often kill for longer before being caught. These cases challenge every stereotype about who commits serial murder and why. They were brutal not always in method, but in intent. They killed for money, for attention, for control, for reasons we may never fully understand. And they remind us that evil is not limited by gender. If these cases left you disturbed by the reality that serial killers can be anyone, regardless of gender, don't forget to subscribe to Final Breath and hit that like button. Drop a comment. Which case shocked you the most? Do you think female serial killers are more dangerous precisely because we underestimate them? Share this video with anyone interested in the psychology of serial murder, because after learning these stories, you'll never look at caregivers, nurses, or even mothers the same way again.